also, while I have some information, I'm also here to listen, and looking forward to a dialogue. But
Can you introduce yourself once again?
Sure, Ryan Ellis with PJ Morgan Real Estate.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. We have a few more people.
Yeah, a few more folks trickling in.
Table rules?
Kitchen table, like, I don't want to hijack your speaking.
You need some sort of structure.
Okay, so can I do that?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay, so before Ryan starts, I know that this meeting was kind of short notice. I know that we all shared it on social media when we got it this morning. Just want to kind of make sure that, and I'm not trying to hijack Manny's meeting, but I know that we all have a lot of opinions what's going on in North Omaha. I'm just asking if we could all be respectful and make sure that we can wait until he's done with the presentation to ask any questions. And then if it's some questions that can't be answered, if you can at least write them down and maybe put your phone number and your information on it, and then Ryan, I hate to put you on the spot like that, so you can call, but just want to make sure that, you know, the information that we receive, that we can move in a timely manner, because again, it is a late meeting, and we just want to make sure that everybody gets the information. But again, just make sure that we're getting the information that we need, and then if there's some questions that you have that is not answered, instead of us prolonging it and keep going and going and going, save that question, write it down, put your name and your information on there, and give it, and let Ryan be able to contact you, and maybe he can give you a more one-on-one conversation on that, or get somebody to do it. I just want to make sure that we're just using the time wisely.
Perfect.
Sorry, I didn't mean to hijack your meeting.
That's great.
Before, I'm hoping in your introduction you will explain who's chairing this meeting and who called this meeting to order.
Sure. Catherine and I were talking about having this meeting. I actually, just to be fully honest, didn't know it would be a public meeting, so I thought it was just a small group of people getting together, which is fine. I'm happy to be here and share the project, and then get feedback as well. The way I like to do stuff like this is just share what I know and then listen, and I can answer questions I know, or just be honest and say, I don't know that answer, but I'll find out. But I would love to get input tonight, you know, on ideas or questions, concerns, and again, a lot of those like bigger, broader topics, I'm not gonna know necessarily an answer to, but happy to talk about it. So, just kind of diving in, again, I'm Ryan Ellis with PJ Morgan Real Estate. I grew up in Omaha, went to Central High School downtown, always really loved downtown Omaha. I started working for PJ Morgan 18 years ago. I was an intern there, worked in property management, did some sales, became president of PJ Morgan about 8 or 9 years ago, in kind of an interesting economic time. And around that time, I also started working on the Mastercraft property, which is at 1111 North 13th Street. And at the time, the Mastercraft had just been converted from a completely empty building to potential office space. And there were a few office tenants in the building when I started working on it. And over a 10-year span, we've rented to probably 70 different tenants and focused on a few things, mostly creative tenants, some community service organizations. We said no to some folks that we thought might not be a good fit. They just didn't add flavor to the creative community in the building. An example of one was a trucking firm that was really mad we didn't rent to them, but they weren't bringing. They had 3 people who worked in an office, and they didn't bring creativity, they didn't bring jobs, they didn't bring much. So that building has always evolved with that kind of spirit. And the guy who owned it, his name's Bob Grinnell, and Bob owned a building to the south called the Ashton. It's a 4-story, full city block long building. And we marketed that building for a couple years for sale. He was moving out of it, he had his own business in it. And as we were marketing it, everyone thought apartment building for this building. You know, an old brick warehouse in Omaha tends to get converted to apartments. and the numbers on it were hard to make work. So we started to think, okay, well, the Mastercraft works so well as a creative office community. Why couldn't this building work that way? So I started a dialogue with Paul and Annette Smith. Paul is a semi-retired executive from Tenaska Energy. He also grew up in Omaha. His wife, Annette, grew up in Ashland. They have an office in the Tip Top building at 15th and Cumming. So they like the area. They think, the old buildings. They really love the history. We started talking about the Ashton building, and what became evident to them was that it could be a great project, but it could be a fantastic project if we worked with a little more scale. So they asked Bob, who owned both buildings, could he sell the Mastercraft and the Ashton together at one time? And that came with about 15 acres of ground that had nothing on it. And in the course, we started looking at some of the vacant ground around there as well and saying, okay, well, if we could get those folks to sell to us as well, we could maybe make this even a little bit bigger of a project with a little more impact and solve some problems that are frequent in real estate. One in that neighborhood is Nicholas Street that runs through the middle of the historic buildings is currently a truck route. So there's up to 1,000 semi-trucks a day running up and down a historic corridor. I mean, they're rattling the buildings, shaking bricks loose. It's a giant problem. So part of that vacant ground could become a reroute for the truck route, which is something we're working with the city on. We also thought some of that property near the truck route could make a good spot for a parking structure. So we're working on that with the city. And also looking at it, there's another full city block of historic warehouse called the Disbro block. It's been vacant for at least a decade, if not longer. So we approached that owner and said, hey, we're working on this idea. Would you be interested in selling? And he said, yeah, I'd like to do that to see this project move forward. And this project is still evolving. So when I talk about it today, there's not anything, there's a few things kind of set in stone, but overall, we're still getting ideas, input. A landscape designer was just hired to talk about park spaces. So we're not like, this is what we're doing and here's what it is. It's more of this is the vision, here's some ideas we're sorting out, and we're looking for more ideas, truthfully. One of the things that happened early on is that we signed a lease with Flywheel. They're a web hosting company. They're in downtown Omaha. They currently have 180 employees, I want to say. And they project by early 2020 to have around 400 employees. So they signed a lease for about 67,000 square feet in the Ashton building. That's a floor and a half of that building. With that, we are looking to get some more office tenants in it, but it also gives us an opportunity to bring some retail services to the building. If you have been to the Mastercraft or worked in the Mastercraft over the last decade, a frequent question I get is, where can I get a cup of coffee? Where can I get a sandwich? There's no retail services anywhere nearby. So this big infusion of Flywheel in their employment base helps us market some of those services. And we've just started talking to people. We haven't really signed leases with anyone else yet. Trying to think through, I've kind of gone historically on the project. Some bigger things we're working on with the city is adding more infrastructure, getting some more roads put into that area, because Nicholas goes through from 11th to 16th. I think Izzard doesn't go all the way through, if I remember right. So it's harder to, like, if you go to the Mastercraft, it's at the end of a dead-end road right now. It's a short road. So we're trying to create more access points, make it easier to get into the neighborhood and when you're leaving. We're looking at what does that neighborhood need. It's historically been I guess I should say what the neighborhood is. It's from 11th to 13th, from Izzard to Seward, roughly, is the scope of the Millwork Commons project. The Millwork Commons name came because the Ashton building and then the Disbro block that I mentioned were both millwork properties. And what I was told is if you had a home in Omaha from the late 1800s, the woodwork likely came out of the Ashton building, and then the neighboring buildings were built to compete with them. So even into the early 1900s, they came out of this like little couple block area. That's what I'm told. So as part of the Millwork Commons, that's what that kind of boundary again, 11th to 13th, Seward to Izzard. So within that, we're looking at what's needed here. What kind of housing types? We presume that more people will want to live there. And is that apartment? Are there ownership opportunities? And within those, are they condos, townhomes? What kind of product could be there? In terms of, there's a nonprofit community within the Mastercraft. What can we do to help support that? And what other opportunities are out there? There's some arts organizations that have expressed interest in participating in the community. We also see an opportunity to concentrate tech jobs. And in Omaha, if you look at the scene of where the tech companies are that are really growing and hiring and saying we need to hire people, they are spread out through the city. And so we see this as an opportunity to maybe see some people concentrate together. They're competing for work, they're competing for hiring and all these things, but we think if they can get together and collaborate, something really cool can happen in this neighborhood. So I don't want to ramble on too much, but that's kind of the general vision and what got us to where we are today. Probably, where are we, November? Probably about a year. Really hard for a year. It was talked about a little bit as an idea before that, but putting everything together, it's been about a year.
And you said you had ideas, and are there some ideas that you like more than others?
No, not necessarily. None of them have really been like market studied or really developed yet. They're just concepts being talked about. I guess ideas I do like, and I think that our team, and I'm careful not to speak for everyone on the team because they all have pretty different, voices and opinions, and they're all still being talked about. So I don't want to say this is definitive, but what we do like is a new road needs to get added into the neighborhood, but to the north of the Ashton building. There's a big sewer pipe that was part of the sewer separation project, so you can't build on it anyway, so it makes a good spot for a road, get ingress, egress better. And there's a lot of land next to that road, and what we think is really cool with that opportunity is to create a park space there so that we can close down that road and create kind of a plaza that can be used for events and different programming. We really like that idea. Around that, we like the idea of providing somewhere for people to live. People who work at Flywheel have said it would be great if there could be an education component tied to this project. And that could mean anything in terms of education, but we really like that. And we like that maybe being around the park. It draws students or other employees from different businesses, maybe are coming for specific education and training.
And you already have Metro's Makerhood building there, so there is already a community college aspect present in the
Exactly.
area.
Yeah, and if something could be expanded on that, I think that could be really cool.
Could you go over the parameters one more time between 11th and 13th, Izzard to Seward?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So south of Nicholas, between Nicholas and Izzard, there are two old buildings. You're thinking about both of those
Yeah.
across from the hot shops.
Yep, exactly. Yep. And we've met with the hot shops, tried to, let them know what we were doing. Hope that they liked it, and they did. So, we want to play nice with them. They're a great neighbor. They've done a lot for that neighborhood.
What city council district is that?
It's Ben Gray's district.
What about Connie?
It's It's all North Omaha.
Yeah, it would be.
It's all North, it's Chris Rogers and Van Gray's area.
Have you met with them?
And
I've not met with Chris Rogers.
District
part of
11
our
too,
team
right?
has.
We talk about
I
this
believe.
county.
well, yeah.
Part of
Well,
the team, with team,
Yeah, so Paul and Annette Smith, that I mentioned,
the owners?
they're the lead of the development group.
So have you met with Councilmember Ben Gray about this?
I personally have not met with them. Paul and Annette have met with them.
I have a question. With the roads you're looking at putting in, have you considered like bike trails or any multimodal pathways in that area?
Bike trails, yes, for sure. We're definitely interested in bike trails. We'd like to see where they make most sense, you know, and see where they connect with what the city's thinking in the future, but we'd love to see that for sure. Multimodal,
Same thing.
yeah, you know, but beyond that, like you know, what I get asked a lot is, so you have this project, you have the Makerhood, you have Kiewit's new project, you have the Capital District, you have stuff up at Creighton, like even in that tight area, there's a lot happening, but when you really think about, especially a night like tonight, walking from point A to B, it's cold, it's windy, how can you make that happen a little easier? Even if it's shuttle or scooter or whatever it is, we're trying to figure that out.
Can you tell me anything about the railroad line that goes from the Union Civic Building in downtown north through that whole area? Is that still going to be in use for a long time, or are they talking about taking that and doing something with that?
I think that line will still be active, from what I understand.
I've always thought that would be a really great bike path,
Yeah.
right down into the city and then up into North Omaha.
It could be very cool, and they have some land along it that could
Right.
also, even if they kept the line, maybe something could be done. Yeah, Union Pacific owns, I want to say 25 acres on the east side of the property. So we've talked to them to share our plan. You know, a lot of people in real estate will do things and, you know, they feel a certain need to keep things kind of close to the vest for a long time, just because projects are so complicated, and especially in the scale. But we've taken the approach of, let's just tell them what we're doing. You know, it's gonna get out at some point, and we wanna share, and maybe they've got some good ideas, so let's listen.
On scale, like another time question, right? So,
Okay.
development time, what, like a year for something that big?
So
You wanna do a park, you wanna redo buildings, the street, so about a year?
It'll be a several year project.
Well, P.J. Morgan.
It'll be done in pieces. The Ashton building, Flywheel, we have a commitment to move them in the early part of 2020. So that project will be a little more than a year. And we want to get some of the infrastructure around it, with some of the streets around it done. So that would happen within the year.
So sewage and plumbing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right.
Yeah. Yep.
Brian, I have a few questions. You said you wanted to be transparent. Do you have a copy of the plans that you can share with, I would like a copy of the plans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I didn't know it was gonna be such a large group, I apologize. So I did print a couple of these, which I'm happy to leave, and they're available online, or I can email them as well.
And these are the early renderings of the plan. And are there case studies or other places that you cite for references, inspiration? Actually, would you mind talking about some inspiration?
Yeah, good question. So when you see these, you'll see a lot of this is inspirational photos, because we're so early in on the process that there's not a hard fast, this is what we're ready to do. So that's what you'll see in here. I think that when you get to page 6, 6 and 7 will probably be of a lot of interest to people. They've got kind of aerial views of what, you know, that boundary area we're talking about. And some of these, when you get this, you'll see buildings that are existing, identified in blue. Those are owned by other entities. The historic buildings are in green, and then everything in white is a potential building that could be there. So, which I'm happy to talk through.
What's the
at some
website
point.
that we can look at it at?
Well, if you go to pjmorgan.com,
Just go- okay, gotcha.
On our commercial leasing section, it would be on there.
Okay.
But again, I'm happy to email them. It's sometimes easier to get them more directly.
No problem. Thank you.
And you talked about like a working group. Can you tell us who's on that working group and kind of what the roles and responsibilities are?
Sure. Yep. So the team, at least we've shown here, Black Dog Development Group is Paul and Annette Smith. So Paul, I mentioned, he is semi-retired from Tenaska Energy. He basically built power plants across the world. It's kind of an easy way to put it. So he in a way has worked in development in that, but locally he got involved with film streams, Omaha Conservatory of Music. Actually, that's how I got to know Paul, was through the Omaha Conservatory of Music. His wife Annette is involved with Boys and Girls Club. She's the president of the board this year. So they're the folks behind the Black Dog Development Group.
Is it Black Dog or Black Dot?
Dog.
Dog. Is
Yeah.
it bark? Okay.
Yeah, as in bark, after their dog Ruby. And then myself at PJ Morgan, I have a couple colleagues, Derek Lewin and Colleen Mason, who are helping work on the leasing. And then Eric Dusick in our office, who's a property manager. Allie Pointer, architecture firm, is working on this. They've got their lead person in their office is Megan Lutz. There's, at least for the entire millwork area. And then Field Day Development, which is a consultant, Andrea Cathall. She works on tax credits, construction work. She kind of handles that portion of it.
I would like to ask a question. Have anyone came to you concerning putting in a little coffee shop down in the area? Have y'all checked with someone?
Yeah, we've had a few people call asking about doing that. So,
And one did just open recently on, what is it? Rally Coffee?
Yep.
On 15th Street.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
it used to be Blue Line and then was closed for a few years.
yeah.
So there's something.
Yeah,
in
and he
addition to-
actually, the owner of Rally Coffee, roasts his beans in the Mastercraft building, even though it's coffee shops down the street. So, yeah, we're trying to talk to people about, some concepts that offer even beyond coffee. A quick, affordable grab-and-go option beyond. We might have a sit-down breakfast option, but we know from Flywheel they want a fast grab-and-go kind of option.
And Brian, you mentioned that, you guys were in the planning stage, and so, is there still opportunity for public input? And if so, how would the public, express those wishes or concerns to your group?
Yeah, there's still time for sure. We could have a more large format public meeting. We could also just do one-on-one as well. I'm happy to do that. Either myself or Paul and Annette are happy to do that as well. So probably easiest just to contact me, and I'd be happy to help facilitate getting everyone together.
So from a projection standpoint, when do you see this project coming to a spot where you'll have everything pretty much finalized in your plan?
That would probably be a question I would rely a lot on Field Day Development to help answer. I would think in the next 3 to 5 months is kind of my guess. That's not totally in my wheelhouse of what I do, but from what I observe and hear.
I want to ask another question. What contractor will y'all be using, and will you be getting some of the people in the further north to do some of the work?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
We will, there's multiple buildings here involved. So each building will probably go through a bidding process. The Ashton building, we've already committed to Landros on that one.
Okay.
But we did put it out to bid, had several people approach on it.
So you don't know what all the buildings are gonna have?
No, not yet.
No.
No, like, so for example, the block to the south of the Ashton building, technically, there's like 3 or 4 buildings on that block. You can look at it as one, but there's 3 or 4. I don't know if one contractor will get that whole block or if individual things will happen there. And then within a building, you could have a tenant say, hey, I'm gonna rent from you, but I want contractor XYZ to do my work in my space, which is pretty common and could happen too.
For like using the space in the building?
No.
Like developing that space?
Yep, exactly.
I have another question too. Okay, so 2020, everything's built, right? And I guess the shorter question would be, how much of the project is gonna be dedicated to ownership? So you build the thing, it's nice, it's pretty and everything. I come along and I wanna buy a piece of the property to rent out to whoever, is still, is attracted. How, like, in terms of like percentage wise, have you thought through how much of the lands or how much of the property is going to be offered up for sale to the public?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know yet. And I don't know because when we look at this and show potential buildings on here, they're really just an architect put a cube here. And so we don't, and I like those architects that did a really good job. I didn't mean to make it sound like they didn't, but these are just to show scale. So we don't really know totally yet how all of this could break out. And
so they can be parceled differently. There could be various buildings. Some things could go undeveloped and sold.
Right.
So there's quite a bit of flexibility in that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions to answer on infrastructure, meaning power, sewer, all of that, and how would that break down to each of these? So that's a really hard question to answer today. I would tell you that this group is very open to that dialogue. They don't
be saving some of the historic buildings.
Absolutely.
That's what I was gonna say. So those 2 buildings, the 2 buildings in the green, those buildings are gonna be, if I'm not mistaken, are being refurbished.
Correct.
And in their natural state. And then the white buildings around it are buildings that could potentially be there.
Yeah, that's all vacant ground.
So with that being said, I have 2 questions. So what kind of funding is being used? Are these private dollars that are gonna be used? Or community block grant dollars, TIF, historical money? Like, can you explain what is being put into that to make this? Because a lot of people that live around here, is that going to increase their taxes? They're going to want to know these answers.
Yeah.
So if you can talk about I just want to know funding part, how's that money coming into play?
Yeah, absolutely, great question. So the dialogue for funding right now on the properties is essentially 3 things: private money. They're applying for tax increment financing. So tax increment financing would affect the real estate taxes on that property where it's applied for, not a widespread reach. And then a historic tax credit for the property, which would also affect that property, again, not a widespread reach. There is a thought that, all of these buildings could qualify for those things, so maybe you just say this swath from 11th to 13th, you apply it as a neighborhood or a district or whatever term you want to use, but it only affects, in terms of the taxes, those that you apply for.
Right. And so I did look up just with the Smiths. So they were instrumental in the Capital District in building over that new development over there. So it's not like they're just coming in and just taking over property. They're taking over that property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. Thank you. I forgot to mention that when I was listing some other
the
stuff.
question I have, I guess it's a little bit more, it's closer to, kind of what some of the people at this table and I deal with. Have you contacted the neighborhoods associations that you will be dealing with, the areas that you are in? Do you know who they are? Or when this is built, do you plan on trying to redistribute that to where there would be a new neighborhood association that would be whatever your area is called?
Yeah. So
Hey,
Uh,
Brian, I'm sorry,
Oh,
I
no.
kinda got wind of this meeting today, so unfortunately I had other commitments this evening. I would like to have some further conversation, dialogue with you, so there's
Great.
my number.
Thank you, appreciate it. So I know the Smiths have talked to Ben Gray about what neighborhood associations do you know of? You know, the city usually registers neighborhood associations. So, help us connect in that way. I think though, and I don't know how you go about forming a big and umbrella association. I'm not sure that that's appropriate.
Well, they're called alliances. We
Okay.
have those. Precious is the president of one, and Juanita Johnson is the president of the alliances on 24th Street.
Okay.
So and I'm the president of OIC Neighborhood Association, so that's
Okay.
why we're
Yeah.
here and sort of why my question is.
Cause technically there's not, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think there's an active neighborhood association
No.
in that area
Mhm.
at all at this time.
Okay.
It's considered blighted.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
well-
it's not, since it's undeveloped, it has not had one.
And like the Mastercraft building in particular, you cannot live in, like the city has said
And
no,
it could
so
be
no one's lived
developed
in.
as a
Yeah.
business
A
neighborhood.
business district,
District
that would be something that most
Yeah.
likely that area would
Would
end up
be.
being.
Mhm.
Since, but there is gonna be homes though over there too, I mean, depending,
Yeah.
if they do
Definitely.
any type of condos, so then that would have to go into, do they join, I think that would be a question at that time, do they join the existing alliances and create their own neighborhood association, since it's not one there, or reactivate one that may have been in that area, which I think would be the best thing to do is reactivate and then join an alliance, but I mean, that's something, we don't know what that would be until
Yeah.
we cross over to that, to actual apartment or whatever comes up in that area.
Yeah.
What's,
Right.
what's the residential like, or what's the nearest residential area? Is it north?
It's gonna be west of it.
Yeah, I think on 16th and Nicholas, there's an apartment building.
The Nichols Flats, there's
Yep.
the Rochester apartments, and then there
The
is
And then the
Top.
Habitat
the
homes
Tip
that are
Top,
on the other side.
and then across the street on Cumming, there's those other
The yard.
the yard
Is it Holy Names
in the
over there?
nines. So
Is there any Holy Name homes over there?
only Habitat houses right now.
Oh, okay.
Those are behind Campus of Hope, those are the
Oh,
only
okay.
homes, that's going more toward,
Thanks.
yeah, well, not Lake, but more toward, Fontenelle, well, right before you get to the, I don't know what street that is, it's not 20th, it's before. I mean, it's-
Florence Boulevard.
Florence Boulevard,
Yeah.
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 So them were the closest, those homes right there.
Oh, okay.
If you're at Campus of Hope, you can actually see the new homes that they built back there. I think it's like a little
Yeah.
art thing is back there or
Yeah.
something.
Mhm. And-
Them were the closest homes.
Okay, so I have, the part B to my question was, since this is a blighted and substandard area, did you have any pushback from any of the people who are living in the area? That's the first part. And then the second part is, if you did, and you had to acquire their property, was it because of what we consider a backdoor to eminent domain, which would be the blighted and substandard piece?
Yeah, so none of the properties had it. I'm just trying to think through about, nobody's living on any of them. Like the Disbro block was vacant for over a decade. The Ashton building was being vacated and it was used for warehouse purposes. Mastercraft is, an office building. And then the majority of the rest is all vacant ground. So no one was living in any of this property.
That's actually not what I was asking. What I
Okay.
was asking was,
Sorry.
was there any pushback
Oh,
from
okay.
anyone who owned the property that you were acquiring? And if you did acquire it through pushback, was eminent domain applied to any of those properties
No,
that people
no.
owned? That's what my
No pushback and no eminent
Okay.
domain.
Another question, so I mean, we have this area being developed and we have to address our homeless population that is basically right to the west, north, well, to the west of them, yes, to the west of that area.
Yep.
So how are you going to address the homeless population? Because I mean, it's like, I love that everything is being built, but I don't want to see that it's being built to where it's like, kind of like closing them in, because again, we still have to be respectful no matter what. Living in a home, homeless, whoever, they still have to give them that respect. How are you guys going to address that to where that everybody feels welcome in this area, because again, this is an area of history, this is an area of, historic, you know, every class.
Yep.
We have every class that lives in this area. There's some people say they live in North Omaha. We have every type of demographic. So we want to make sure, like, how is that going to be addressed when it comes to the homeless population in that area?
Yeah, so there's a development in Denver called the Rhino District. And within the Rhino District, there is a shelter. So we went out to tour that area. I know we've worked on it for a year, you asked that question, but that's in terms of like studying properties and environmental stuff and all that. So we're now at the phase of how do we figure that part out, which I think is working with the shelter and collaborating and asking questions and having them ask us questions. And then, you know, Flywheel, we were very upfront with them. We won't build this neighborhood to enclose it. It is to open it up. And so if you don't like that, don't lease here. We don't, you know, that you're going to be unhappy. And so they said, no, this actually, it really important to our staff and our team is that, you know, what can we do for job development, training, you know, all of these tech companies are saying how much they want to hire. Are there opportunities there that we can work with? So we're just starting to talk about that idea and how do you do that? And how do you do it inclusively?
That was kind of going to be one of my next questions it sounds like you guys are moving more into strategy. This is not, it's out of idea phase basically, and you're kind of moving into the collaborations piece, that's strategy.
Okay.
My question was going to be the efforts to include people of color and particular businesses. I'm a black-owned business multiple times over, and so one of my pet peeves is when we have another district or another large structure or something that's supposed to be big, and then it is not conclusive to the residents that are in or near that new structure. So since this is going into what sounds like it's it's going into strategy phase now, what are some of the efforts that you guys are taking to make sure that particularly people of color and black-owned businesses is going to have a presence in this new space?
Yeah, I think I would answer that by saying I would like to listen to ideas and recommendations that are inclusive. You know, in what I do in terms of leasing space, it's, you know, most of what I'm doing is putting it out there and taking as many, we like to say at our office when the phone rings, we're happy to answer it. We're glad someone's calling us so we can do business, you know, and that's our goal. And I can't speak for everyone out there, but in terms of, I mean, it starts really simple for me in answering that question. It's taking everybody's phone call and trying to help everybody. But beyond that, like, are there marketing efforts we should be doing? Are there, that's part of what I want to hear is what should I be doing?
When you mentioned like training and things like that, immediately what comes to my mind is to hire people. As an owner, I don't want to hear you talk about hiring us. You understand what I'm saying? I don't want to hear about that. I want to hear about, if you're going to talk about training, I want to hear you talk about ownership.
Okay.
If you're going to train, you know, people of color in a new space like this, train them to own every time. And yes, of course, also hire.
Sure.
But
and I think the
is
hiring
huge.
question was towards when we were talking about the shelter specifically. So.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, yeah.
And the training is more of the tech side of incorporating classes so that people can prove what they already have, not just saying, oh, we just want to just turn this into a training.
Right.
It's more of like giving us the tools. So, I mean, we can't go to Metro and there's a class Flywheel's offering, because they're a tech company, right? So they're offering something that's going to increase our knowledge or anybody's knowledge, something there that's close and local to home. Now, gosh, I forgot my question already. There was a question. No, because you had said you touched on something that I just couldn't. That's a
Training,
down.
ownership, education.
Yeah, I like the ownership.
Let me throw this out there before Precious remembers. So, okay, so like within the vein that they're speaking about already, in my mind, what I feel like we need down here, and it's not even that I feel like we need it down here. It's like sort of a mini do space, because kids they can't, like, a lot of them are not really old enough to catch the bus and go out and be on 72nd, you know what I'm saying, like by themselves or whatever.
Yeah.
This is somewhere that they can walk to, that they can put all of their energy into it. It keeps them out of trouble. It teaches them something new, something about tech. Flywheel is a cool place. You know, I saw some of the things that they did a couple of years back. So, but this is something that's cool, that would be cool for them to learn. Something that where the seniors can go and learn how to operate their phones, or how to you know, do the RUCO, because now is, you know, that's something that's going to be necessary for them coming up if they want to get rid of cable or whatever they want to get rid of, however. But I'm just saying, these are just things that are just popping into my head as I'm talking to you. But something like that's in the community, that is where we don't always have to leave our community to go and learn something. We can learn something in our community that is right here and down here, and, you know, for us and about us.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Retail space was my question. So, what type of retail are we looking, like, what are the ideas of retail? I mean, everybody, I'm not gonna say, I'm tired of coffee shops, honestly. There's more than coffee. There's some, we don't have a lot of things down in North Omaha. I can make coffee at home with a Keurig. So I just want to know, like, are we looking at other retail so that is actually going to, like you said, like, some people don't have transportation to go out to malls to buy something. Is there going to be, like, chances for not just saying, like, small business, like local business, but like national retail stores that are small, that, you know, are that are close by, that people can go to? I mean, just think of it. I mean, we have College World Series that's going to come down there.
Right.
People like to shop. They already bring enough money into the economy here in the city. But what about for things that we want to use all the time? So, like, have you guys thought about what type of retail, or reached out to any type of, you know, retailer, say, hey, you know, we're developing this new area, community. The money's here. It's there. We just need it. So
groceries would be huge.
I kind of grinned when you started saying that, because I was just waiting for someone to say grocery store.
Where's the grocery store? There's no grocery store.
Man, whoever can bring a grocery store, they've got the touch. That's the most requested thing that I hear.
Okay.
Within retail specifically, is grocery, all across the board. So we're trying to think, you know, differently about who we ask to do that. There are different ways of thinking about it. Meaning, I've heard someone say, "Hey, there's a group in town trying to start a co-op grocery store. You should talk to them." Mm-hmm. Great, I would love to do that and hear about it. Okay. So even at that, we think could be a cool option. And yes, all sorts of services, which I put into a category of, like, you know, insurance, banking, even dry cleaning is kind of retail, but, you know, it's a service. So those are some of the things that, I mean, I don't.
Laundromat.
Yeah. So those are some of the things that we're talking about.
I mean, because I went to Chicago, and I was in an area that it was near the Navy Pier, and this is my first time, like, kind of venturing out. They had, like, a downsized Target, and I couldn't believe it. Yeah. It was very small, and I was like, gosh, this is small compared, but it was right in the middle of a high traffic area. Then I went to St. Louis, Whole Foods, in a little building, like, it was like maybe, I don't think it was a 2-story building, but it was like I call it the compact Whole Foods. Yeah. But those little things right there is like when you have apartments above it, but it was the people needed those little things. Not trying to take away from the co-op, Dewan. Yeah. Whole Foods, but you know.
But the scale, the dimensions, the accessibility.
So it looks like there's ideas out here, and I should say ideas. There's actually businesses who have downsized large retail to bring them into smaller areas. It's like, you know, we need that. Yeah. We need that. I mean, that's serious. I mean, to the point to where we don't have to travel so far for food. I mean, not saying, because we do have certain things. I'm not trying to knock, again, Dawn, I ain't trying to knock your co-op. But
having options.
yes, we need more options, because I mean, that area is, like I said, now that I feel like we're not taking someone's property, it's being purchased. It's space that's available. Let's make the space right. I mean, I would love to see all the different tech buildings and all that stuff, but let's if we have the space and we don't have to take that space from somebody, let's make it worthwhile that everybody can use that space in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Then the other thing.
Got a question in the back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey.
Hi.
I had a question that was picking back up what this gentleman was referring to as far as how can it be like inclusive. And so, my question for you is, on your staff, those who are making decisions, how many, like, I guess, non-white people are there? Because it's one thing to know and gotta get a sense for what the community needs, like services and things like that, but being in touch with the community, is there anybody from the community on your staff, like making decisions, not just the face of what you plan to push?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, honestly, the team that I talked about when I was, talking about the logos, there's probably 5 or 6 people on that team, and everyone on that team is white, honestly. So that is what it is. My involvement is because I've worked on the Mastercraft for 10 years and have a history of working on this project. So that's the honest answer. Yeah.
Well,
but
you talked about, ideas about what can you do, is there marketing, say things like that. I think one push can be getting people on your staff that look like the community and that's tuned into it. I mean, it's what it is.
Yeah, good question. So on that point, like my role, I'm on a commission basis, so I'm not necessarily hiring anyone on my team particularly. So like if someone said, hey, I want to work on this, I want to work on commission, I'm of course happy to talk to anyone about that. That door's always open, but that's just me speaking for my team. Like there's, my involvement is if I do a lease, then I get paid, but there's not like a job where I'm on a payroll per se for my role, if that makes sense.
Are you comfortable sharing who the money behind this project? I mean, who the individuals are that are really calling the shots?
Yeah, Paul and Annette Smith. I mean,
they are the property owners primarily.
They're working on creating a fund that will own all of this, and then people can invest in that fund. But as of today, they're kind of the face of it, and then that will evolve.
And then, so the ripple out from this, I understand the TIF money is for that specific property, whatnot, but there's going to be almost a ripple effect on property taxes as it goes out. I have a building right here that I've had for 40 years, and as the development around me has gone on, which I love to see, hasn't benefited me financially per se, but my taxes are going up to the extent, and I know that the guys at Hot Shops are a little worried about this too, that it's gonna, could force them to move, and I think that's probably gonna happen a little bit. Is there any thought to that for the community at large, for, as this ripples out, I don't even know what I'm asking.
Well, I can just say this. My aunt owns a house right here in Conestoga Place. Bought her house almost 10 years ago. Recently, she passed, and I was doing some looking at her taxes and everything, and her value of her home has dropped almost $20-something thousand from 2016 to now. Her house is about to go for sale, and let me tell you, I've had 5 realtors call me because that area right there is prime real estate.
You want to hold on to it though. I mean, so if I were to take my circumstance where I had my property taxes were X, And a little disingenuous to complain too much about it right now because they were artificially low for a lot of
Yes.
years. Okay, and then incrementally, they've been going up exponentially. So, that, you know, I don't know how far the ripple's gonna be here. Is there any?
Are we
what
affected
can
by the
happen-
taxes?
Yeah.
Are we affected
What
by
can
that?
happen to protect
What can we expect?
the old guy that
Yeah.
wants, speaking for the old guy?
I don't know how the county assessor will look at this project and how far
Sure,
the
yeah, I
circumference
don't
it would
expect
go.
him
I can tell you, you know, we've talked a lot about, even in the immediate core of it, you know, we have a lot of tenants in the Mastercraft that tax value affects if that building goes up a lot. You know, we pride that building, I have for a long time, on the affordability of it, so we have to be really careful how we play in that sandbox of increasing values. Cause then you can have tenants say, well, I can't afford this anymore, and then this beautiful building you've created starts to, you know.
Well, then it is gentrified to the next level, and then you have a whole different group or class or whatever of tenants.
Yeah, I think, that could happen, yes, that's certainly not the hope of this group. Certainly me, who worked so hard to build that idea there,
Sure.
so, and I know, like, you'll hear Annette Smith repeatedly say, like, I don't want, you know, we didn't buy this to raise rents, like, this is
Well,
to
that's
keep it.
encouraging to
It
hear.
is, and I think that also helps with value in that particular building. And that's a great dialogue to have with the assessor. But I don't know how big the,
Well,
or
then-
small the
then
ripple could
can-
be.
Because like that's a part of another question I was gonna ask you, when you said investments. Like with his type of situation, there should be some nuance to how people can invest in the new structure that's near them, so that
Mhm.
maybe it offsets what he's talking about.
Yeah.
You know, so again, now that we know that we're past kind of the idea phase of this thing, have you put any good energy into how people can subscribe to or invest in this new structure in such a way that it'll benefit them not arbitrarily, but realistically, especially if they're already a property owner in the immediate area?
Yeah, I think that's being looked at right now, honestly.
I mean, it could be like a REIT, you know what I mean?
Just looking at it, like, is there like a team?
Yeah, the Black Dog Development Group is looking at that and they know more information about that.
What's it called?
Black Dog Development. Yep, so they're looking at that, and I don't know, like, you know, the scale totally of that and what a buy-in could be like that, but I know.
It definitely needs to be probably its own meeting, or its own class, of course, because there's a lot of different types of trust, or even there's crowd funds, in terms of allowing people to get a piece of what is new in the community that they live in.
Yeah.
And we need to know exactly how that works, how dividends work, how all of that stuff works.
Can I just say, I know you had asked a question about stakeholders, and I'm not saying that I know who's all, but I just know that there are people who know about it. They just don't know about the extent, and they've been in discussions with being notified as leaders. I'm not able to say who those people are because that's not my place, but I just want y'all to know that there is people of color. If that's what you're worried about, like who's able to talk, who knows about it, who's talked about it, and being able to say like what they feel for the community wise. So I don't want to make it seem like it's just, you know, in Ryan's defense, it's not just there has been discussion. So that would be, I think the next step, honestly, is to have a community meeting where if Paul and Annette are willing to come and sit down and talk more in depth, since they are the ones who will be funding this, as well as being I shouldn't call him Ben like that, Mr. Gray, to be in the meeting, and Chris Rogers. I mean, because this is their district, and this is an area that they need to be able to say this is what's going on. that's my personal opinion as a leader in North Omaha, that has to come from them so they can assure us that these are the things, and then we know who we need to hold accountable.
And also Diane Badiata, she could.
Cause she, well, and then in regard, right, but then, and then in regards to the taxes, I think a lot of us are now seeing, and now say the reason why we saw them go down, because they did under assess our taxes. Then they had to go back when being the one that said no, you under assessed it, people started buying the property. They had to come back and reevaluate all the property. So now people are seeing what their true values of their property truly is. After they paid this low sum, now they're having to pay a little bit more. So hopefully that needs to be, addressed with her, like how does that affect, but we won't truly know until the actual building or what is actually on land.
Right.
So I mean, I would hate to pull Diane in here and say what's it gonna be, and she speculates, and then you don't know until it actually until you got solid plans say what's gonna be built there.
Right.
So one of the questions that I have is, do you, I know it's, because you keep saying that this is prelim, but this had to be a discussion of what your carbon footprint is gonna look like. So, we have all this talk about global warming and all this other thing. So, with all the businesses that are gonna be in there, you're gonna be concentrated in this one area. Have you thought about any green sources that you will be using for this building? Like maybe you might want to use bamboo floors. It's a little bit more expensive in the beginning, but then it'll pay off in the end. So, I don't know how that would look, but
Yeah,
Are there gonna be solar panels on the roofs, different things like that?
yeah, the team at Alley Pointer likes to say that the most green thing you can do is save a building versus tear it down and start new. So from step one, we feel like we lined with the right team to look at those issues. So, and when I say it's early on, like all of that land, there's nothing planned for it yet. So but for the Ashton building, we're currently going through what can be salvaged, what can be saved, what can be done, so we don't have to take things out, and so we can repurpose them, and I find a lot of beauty in what's there. The beautiful wood columns, the beautiful wood ceilings, and then you have to look at that and say, how do I adapt that in a modern way so that a company can come in and they can control, installing all of their technology, control sound, have adequate lighting, all of that stuff has to be done. And some of it is on our watch, and sometimes when a tenant moves in, you could move into this space and say, I'm gonna change out the lights, and you rent the space, you pick the lights yourself. So, there are energy codes now, but they could pick the least energy friendly light. We're trying not to rent space in that way, but it can happen, so, but we talk about that a lot, yeah.
Mr. Elijah had a question.
Oh, I think there's one behind you too, I'm sorry.
I don't want to sound like I'm picking on you, but there's some things that I think this community needs, very important, and there's not many opportunities for development, so I appreciate that as part. But nutrition and access to food is very important, and it's so important that Ben Gray and Chris Rogers haven't been able to do anything about it. So I just want, you're talking about buildings and bringing in grocery store. Well, do that. That'd be very beneficial for the community, and not just any grocery store. I heard you talk about co-op grocery store. Well, you can have a tax-funded grocery store, city-funded grocery store, but that's needed here. Access to good food, not just a Walmart, because people need variety. So I'm glad people are telling you this. Another thing is, as I understand it, is you guys have a fund, so you want to make a return on your money. You want to have the venture aspect to it, creating and developing opportunities. So to that point, I would say that smaller space for business owners would be good for people who don't have access to capital and they can't make their own buildings or something like that. So for them to have access to space to develop their business would I think would benefit the local community here. I know it's a tricky area because you have these discussions and you talk about the College World Series and you talk about downtown Omaha, but I appreciate that you're trying to see what creative things you can have happen here with the community and with your money. Also, on the taxes, I believe that the assessor by statute has to go with the market price. So that's why there's always this discussion about the fluctuation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because that's by law. So you're part of the free market. So I think having discussions with her would be important.
Yeah.
As early as possible.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and just to touch real quick on the size too, like Mastercraft, when we started, I mean, it's 140,000 feet, you could chop it up in and we had opportunity to do a really big tenant in that building, and the owner, Bob, said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to provide smaller spaces. So our very smallest is 200 square feet. There's only one of those, truthfully. But then the rest of them start at more of a 400 square foot range. And then they go up from there. So there's a big variety. So that
you spoke about possibility of having like tenants be able to develop.
Yeah. I've always thought that is a big barrier for getting into real estate ownership, is the size and scale of things. And when you look at such a giant project, if it's only offered up as 10 acres, it is hard. I mean, it's only so many people can approach that. So that's something I bring up often, is that I think more communities would be successful if they really considered the scale. Now, there's a lot that comes into play, like we talked about infrastructure a little bit and all of those costs that sometimes make that hard to do. But it's on the table for discussion.
Mr. Elijah?
Did you say you were gonna open up a street to the west, which would be the 16th?
North. Yeah, there's currently a road from 11th to 13th called, if it were placed on the city grid right now, that road would be Indiana Avenue. There's talk of naming it something different, but for now it's Indiana Avenue. What we're working with the city on, the city's in charge of moving the truck route off of the historic corridor. And it looks like that would go to 14th Street, and I think then Indiana would connect to 14th Street. And that would, just trying to get my bearings, I'm sorry. Nicholas, then it would rely on Nicholas to 16th Street.
That would be where the storage buildings are, right? Is there any street that you're opening that's going to open up, will open to 16th? Anywhere you're going from 11th or whatever to 16th?
Our scope only goes to 13th Street, so, no.
No stop. The only thing that you'll be doing is between 11th and 13th. Right. There'll be nothing going from 13th to 16th.
Not at this time, yeah. There's, I think the railroad was mentioned earlier, that kind of cuts west of 13th Street.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of a natural,
Cutoff for
Yeah.
your boundary line,
Exactly.
basically.
There's right on the railroad, right next to it.
One that's already there, and I want to say Grace, that runs through that storage piece, stores, automobile, where they do the automobiles.
Oh, American Auto Parts goes to Grace on 16th, but then it turns into.
All they have to do on that one is open up, tear down a fence, and it will open up to 16th.
Hmm.
And so you're not in any kind of conversation that's going to open up that.
No.
That would be the city.
Yeah, yeah.
They don't own that property.
Pardon?
That would be a project that the city would have to look at and take on. We go to the end of Mastercraft, which is more like Seward Street. So that would be north of the project.
I had a quick question. You said earlier Paul and Annette are building the fund that will fund this.
Yeah.
There will be others that are able to invest in that fund. Who and when will that start?
So they'll lead that. It could be Star Beam or Star TID. I can find out and get back to you.
Is it open to public?
I don't know.
Not sure.
But I'm happy to find out.
Yep.
The through street for the other building, for like the what's it called, the Mastercraft? No,
Makerhood.
The other building.
Makerhood, yeah.
Makerhood building. They were also supposed to do some work on a closed street, because they said we found this out when we had Noosa here. Was it Noosa? No, it actually wasn't Noosa. It was DeWine. You actually weren't you in that? Weren't you in there when I was in there? It was not. It was at. It was before the Warren Buffett had. It was Startup.
Was it that
Startup
Urban Land Institute?
It was, yeah, but it was Omaha Startup.
Okay.
And they were. This was before Noosa. This was like a couple of years before that. So they were talking about creating that hood the Maker Hood at that time.
Oh, Future Forward?
Future Forward, and
Future
they were
Forward.
talking about creating the Maker Hood at that time. And then they also said in that class that we took that they were going to take the closed street and do a little bit about what you talked about today. And so I'm just trying to figure out, because I've never been over in the Maker Hood. I'm just trying to figure out, did that ever occur?
No.
And
I don't know which.
Where's the Maker Hood at?
It's
like
it's
right
on
around
it's
Nicholas
on
Road.
11th on Nicholas. So if you take
Oh,
Nicholas and
okay.
curve around,
And they because they wanted a bike. They were talking about the bikes. The same exact conversation that you're having right now. They've had this at the startup. So it's like I'm hearing this whole conversation again, and it seems like that some of the pieces that they talked about were abandoned, and now we're hearing it again, and it's just being regurgitated. And then are we going to be hearing about this again when it's abandoned and then regurgitated and then abandoned? You know what I'm saying? Like I'm kind of,
Yeah.
I'm not
I hear you.
understanding.
Yeah.
And is there any connection or relationship with Future Forward? That kind of there was a World Herald article about 2-3 years ago. It was like Future Forward is interested. It was an organization, it was an idea, but very much looking at the same area and developing this.
Yeah, so they, the Maker at Future Forward is concentrated on 11th Street, mostly what you see of it actively, mostly warehouse-style buildings. They do own land on the east and west side that we're talking to them about buying. Future Forward is a nonprofit entity, so they can own real estate and lease it to people, but they can't develop property. And they can't just go up and build a building and put it up for lease. So we are talking to them about purchasing some of that vacant ground. And that's not done yet, but being worked on. And they could come back and say, no, we're not gonna sell it, and we'll move on. You know, we're not gonna try to force their hand. I think the main road that happened, I remember that conference, I think it was the Urban Land Institute, looked at that area and did a study and said this is what should happen. But I'm not quite sure who all was involved with that. I know at the time the owner of the Mastercraft said, wow, that's all around me, you know, but I don't know about it. So I'm not quite sure how that all.
Wasn't her name Elizabeth?
I don't.
She actually was, I want to say she was a part of Peter Kiewit, or she worked for Peter Kiewit. Wasn't that what she said she worked with? Because she wound up leaving there and getting, like, they gave her money.
Tracy?
No, I want to say her name was Elizabeth. It's
Are
like
you talking
there.
are you talking about from Omaha by Design?
Jamie Burgos?
I can't put it
sorry.
together right now. I
Yeah.
have all the
At that time, I feel like it was all really theoretical.
Yeah.
And no one who owned the property, including the Mastercraft owner Bob, correct?
Right.
Was not. He was like, "That's cool, but I don't know how."
It wasn't really done with input. It was done as a really high look at, like, this is something you could do, and then it got, I think, pushed a little forward in the paper before there was a real dialogue about it. So some of these concepts came from that, like the road over the sewer separation that's called Indiana. That was a big part of that study.
Okay, so these are Alright, so you're hearing it over and over.
Yeah, I'm just.
So,
You
so
are,
basically,
yeah.
so basically
Because-
just,
It's a different project.
Because
Well, yeah, because
Yeah,
it's, because that's kind of what we do before we buy a property. We look at the best practices or the best ideas, and if no other newer, better, best ideas come along, you'll hear about the same ideas.
so this road that, I mean, basically the road is being diverted so that when this is being developed, is it just more of, to keep the trucks, kind of divert them more, not saying like, but divert them more away from, I mean, cause honestly, I mean, if you look at all this right here, you have semis coming through here, that is like completely, like unsafe, so is it,
Safety's an issue, the
Okay.
structural integrity of the buildings are an issue.
so this road doesn't even exist right now?
No,
Oh,
yeah,
So have you thought about how these people will get their products then? Because you're still gonna have to have some type of road where, semis.
Yeah, the trucks will still have to-
Delivery,
yeah, absolutely.
but they
would
still would have to come into these structures and that's gonna be like a constant, so.
There would still be delivery trucks. The problem with the current trucks are, again, there's about 1,000 a day, and at the speed they move at too
They're
is
not
really
servicing
fast.
the buildings there as a
Right.
pass through.
Yeah, they are just barreling through.
so then, so once you develop this,
the
and put that thing, it's like gonna keep them, I mean, cause, I mean, I'm thinking that once this is developed, it's gonna be nothing but stop signs in this area.
it would be
It's
like
gonna divert them no matter what, cause I mean, I don't think I would wanna be in the semi having to stop every time.
yeah, and if you think about the old market, there's lots of businesses that get deliveries from semis, trucks. It still needs to be accessible and usable.
Mhm.
It's just not a main thoroughfare.
They
for
move
trucks
around the
anymore.
periphery, less through the center of
So
activity
you basically think
in order to
it's
create
gonna go
hazards.
Yep.
Gotcha.
They'll enforce it if they want to or not. It'll happen one way or another.
Can you revisit, okay, with all this being said, can you revisit again, like residential areas? You said there's extra land. And one of the best places to recoup your money is with rental properties, aside from the actual business rentals. So what are you guys thinking about, apartment buildings there, or you said something about condos and stuff like that?
Yeah, we haven't done any economic studies on that yet. It's just been talked about that, those all of the different types of housing should probably be looked at. Whether it's an apartment building, a condo building, a townhome style building. When you flip through
Can you
these,
like
you'll
show me that picture of
I'm gonna start writing on
the
all
AutoCAD thing again?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna start writing, like, those,
Yeah,
writing
right
notes
there.
on here.
Yeah,
Show me that
yeah.
one more time.
Yep, so like in here, again, this was just for scale, but these look like townhomes.
All right.
So, I don't know if those are viable as rental or as sale yet.
Probably like that.
Are we looking at more affordable housing? I mean, cause I mean, if we're using TIF dollars and using historical funds, I mean, is this gonna be housing, like affordable housing for regular middle class, or just gonna be like, we
'Cause
built,
my idea, I thought, when I look at that,
We can't live in.
like when they built them houses, remember they built them, there's like
Right.
$100,000?
Right.
Like, who even thought about that? Well, that was NP Dodge, so I'm not gonna blame.
when I was thinking about this, the first thing that come to mind is like, okay, Midtown all over again, pretty much. And I'm like, who are you gonna attract? And then we get into that problem I was talking about earlier. Who? Right?
Right.
So, yeah, I see where you're at.
The vision.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and-
we wanna look at it all.
I got it.
Well, I think
Figure it out.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I think, yeah, Paul and it, I think that needs to, I mean, I honestly feel that needs to have a conversation. That needs to have a conversation so that we are able to really give serious input, because, I mean, honestly, we've had developments that have been developed. We've not had no input in those developments. And then when it comes time for us to use that space, we're charged an arm and a leg to use that space. Well, some people are charged an arm and a leg to use that space. Or you see people that live in these housings who have never had no type of history to the area that they live in. So I feel that this conversation needs to be had. If it's a truly genuine, serious conversation of wanting our input, then we need to make sure that our input is in that, because again, we see it coming around us, it's developing, and like Michael said, who?
Yeah, it's a what's in, it's a,
We definitely need low-income housing, apartments, condominiums, something we can be able to buy and live in and be comfortable, because, we as individuals, low-income people, we don't get a whole bunch of money.
I don't see senior living, I mean, we can, that's gonna be, yeah.
So you all are basically saying something about a diverse neighborhood?
It needs to be more diverse, it needs to be affordable housing, it needs to be,
Affordable housing.
you develop an area like that in North Omaha, in a part where we're at, and you don't see people that look like us, you don't feel that it's for you. And then you're being charged to use space, and it's like, well, man.
With that TIF money, it should be used for low income and redevelopment for older building. All that should go back within to the neighborhood.
Or something near it. I mean, it needs to be more funding put. Like if you have all this empty space. I mean, honestly, you have this in your Lincoln Roads. I could see nice little senior living in that area. Like you can see all that stuff down there. What they want to be downtown, they want to have those amenities. They don't want to be stuck in a high rise. So it needs to be more of a diverse of every background in this area. And I feel like if we can, if you can drive down here, if you can spend your money here, we can live together too. We can work together. We can live together. Don't separate us because of this development. So that's how I look at it.
And we want some people that are gonna walk to it, not walk around it, because they're afraid of,
For me, it keeps buzzing in my head when you're asking about how you can market better. And my question is just like, even on the small end, do you have like a social media for this that will accumulates all this information that you're gathering? So that, because I know websites can be costly, but keeping it simple and doesn't have to be like fancy graphics, but as you're progressing on ideas, and then you can like open up like virtual forums where it's like, hey, we're thinking about doing this, what do you think? And like, cause that opens up accessibility a lot more, and it's very low end on the cost. I don't need fancy graphics, I just want people to feel involved. And I can keep rambling on that, but
no, that's a good suggestion. There's a Millwork Commons Facebook page that,
and there's an Instagram too.
Yeah, I was like, I think someone started.
There's
that.
Instagram. The first page is Dusty and the mayor from the grand opening. So that could be something where the renderings go, these kind of conversations go, your site visits, but just kind of Atlas did something like that too when they were working on that, just to kind of like, there's this change happening. Yeah. It's people like to be able to, if I can Google it and find it and see the progress, then I feel just a little bit better versus just like, well, we'll find out in 2020 when people move in, that kind of thing.
I feel like with that, because like even as much as I love noise, like you don't want it to be so much that everyone's depending on all these other resources to find out about you, because they're like, where's the hub at?
Right.
Like who is this actually?
Yeah, and social media is an easy way to capture a lot of information. It's hard to get.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
So I think it is important that you speak with Ben Gray and Chris Rogers because they represent.
They've already spoken to
But that's formality.
Yeah.
That's just formality. I think what you're doing is spot on, talking to the community here, seeing what can happen here, making a place where people go to, not necessarily another obstacle, a structure there. But you got to make your money, so I understand that part. Whatever you develop with the community, it goes to city council, they're going to approve it. So that's why I'm making the point that you talking to the community is vitally important.
Yeah, it is really important, and I didn't really speak to the affordable housing issue, but that's one that's perplexed me for a long time. There's
working in real estate in Omaha, yes.
Oh yeah, it's a hard problem to solve. It's not. I mean, if it were easy, someone would be doing it, and in a sustainable way where there's some profit and it's all the good things, but still making some money, and it's barely done here well, and so from what I understand, and there's a lot of hurdles to that. there's only so many incentive programs for developers, because if you think about a developer who has a pot of money to work with, if they're really developing, they're gonna look to maximize that pot of money. So how do you collide with that and make it work in a functional way that, you know, like in other cities, bigger markets, you'll see even apartment buildings or condo buildings where there's multiple markets within that. So you might have a 4-market apartment and a subsidized apartment next door to each other. You know, those are, I think, really interesting dialogues, but they're not happening a lot here. So, you know,
No, because people feel that if they live next to a subsidized housing, that they feel like they're, yeah, like I don't know, it's like they're judgmental, and so I feel like that's the wrong thing, and I feel like that's where we need to get to a point where we have more affordable housing. Look, if people the way they live, they want to live in a quality housing, they'll take care of. There's people who feel like, oh well, because so and so. I mean, you see it in neighborhoods all the time.
Yeah.
You see it in neighborhoods all the time. The first thing they say is somebody's renting their house out to low income, and they're quick to want to judge on it, and it's like, it's not right. But if you increase the wages, maybe people wouldn't have to have low income housing. So again, we go back to
what are we actually talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hard problem to solve.
So it's like,
all in Millwork Commons.
Yeah, so I mean, we can fix it.
But then the people that are living in those houses, they need to be forced to keep it up and fix it up.
Yes,
And
that's a
keep
whole
it
nother,
clean.
that's a whole nother conversation.
Keep
We
it
know.
clean. I know
We
it.
know. We'll be here all night talking about
They
that.
will not do it to save their souls, and they'll bring the neighborhood down. The people that's got these quality homes don't want to live next door to low income houses.
And that's the thing.
They don't want to
where-
have nothing to do with low income
I
houses.
think nutrition has a big part of that.
Because of these people are not used to having anything, and they don't know how to take care of nothing, and they're running in the ground.
Well, they shouldn't.
I think it's
That's why they
Yeah,
always
I think
they
we-
always
We'll come on
screen the
Saturday.
people better, but they put these people in these
I think
buildings.
that's a
And
conversation.
it just
We got
destroys.
two more,
Yeah,
and
two more.
then
Yeah.
we'll wrap it
Yeah.
up.
We can
Thank
have
you
that
for
one. We can
hanging
wrap
on for an hour and a
But
half.
I'm just saying,
I want to say this about the housing piece before we get off that.
Yeah.
I lived in Denver for 20 years, so I'm really familiar with the Rhino District and our district and everything down there like that. So that can be like that can be, if that you're using that as a model, that can be like a really successful model. Another thing that you may want to look at Denver for is how they do some of the housing, because one of the places that I lived in, it was beautiful. I had a beautiful condo there, but I never really knew that some of the same exact size condos that I had, they had like a certain number of them that they
Had to be
were subsidized. So that may be a situation where it may not be as commonly known, but people can come and inquire. You know, it can be where, you know, you can come and talk about what your income level is, and then they can tell you, well, we have X, Y, and Z number of apartments that are income based or whatever, and then you can get in because we still have these units available or whatever. And then the other people that are living in the building don't have to know all that, because that's not something that was in their income bracket in the first place. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's just a way of approaching the situation. Like, I didn't know the person that lived across the hall from me was subsidized, and by the time I got to know her, it didn't matter. You see what I'm saying? So those are the types of things I'm talking about. It's just a way to approach them.
Yeah.
I had, this is probably one last thing to say anyway. With all of it, essentially, I guess my line of questioning is a lot of the focus is the what's in it for me, right? But as a community though, because a lot of the problem that we see when one of these new structures or one of these new developments comes into the community, even though the structure itself was meant to, you know, purpose for certain things, it doesn't give anything to the community itself. It just takes from the community. So if there was one piece of information that I would give you, is to make sure that you not only build it in a way that benefits the community it's sitting in, but that it gives to the community, that should be a lot bigger piece of these projects that come in. You know, not just that it's pretty and it's new and it's, you know, whatever, but that, you know, it's giving something to, you know, sharing is caring, right? You know, like that in elementary school. So figure out more impactful ways to share. If, you know, if this development happens to surplus a year, you know, $1, 2, 3, 5, $10 million in a year, figure out how to give some of that money back to the community. Figure out how to encourage more business ownership so that they can come and rent from you at the price that the market says that it's supposed to be. You understand what I mean? Figure those things out. Those things will encourage more interactions with
Yeah, and for the, I said I don't like to speak for people that aren't here, but to be, to speak a little for Paul and Annette Smith, since they're not here, I think they're a great group to receive that message, those two. They've done a lot of work for the community, and so I think they're gonna.
I'd love to meet with them, and especially if they're the owners, you're the project manager?
I do the leasing on the project.
Okay, so you okay, them, the owners, project management team, or the person.
Yep.
You gotta be there, you know, and then any of the people that have influence over the finances, the investments part of it. Those are people that I like to talk to about things like this.
Yeah. Yeah, they, I guess just, you know, to backtrack about Paul for a minute, he was trying to recruit someone to come work in Omaha, and they said they wouldn't come work here. And he asked why, and they said, well, there's not a really good place for my kid to take music lessons. Like, they just can't find one. And he's like, I don't know, like, how can that be true? It's Omaha, it should be achievable. And he looked around and he's like, okay, I think they're right. Like, their kid is really achieving high in music, and to keep achieving at that level, the opportunity was limited. So he sought to solve that problem by helping. I think the Omaha Conservatory of Music had maybe been founded, but it was in a couple thousand feet. And if you look today, they're in a $15 million state-of-the-art facility, and I'm on the board with them there. We have a program called Sprouts that has currently 1,200 students in it, you know, and that came out of him being like, wait a minute, like, not only is this solving a problem I heard about, but it's doing something for the community. And so for, like, that's what they do. Like, that's kind of what they live and breathe for.
That's good.
Yeah. Our tuition at the conservatory is way
Paul
under
and Annette
market.
Smith, Paul and Annette Smith were also contributors to the Union for Contemporary Art as well. So
that's what makes them more interesting. You know, not more interesting. I'm not saying
they're way more interesting than me.
They're more. It's more of you can see the programs that they give into that they.
Yeah, the particular type of questions that I'm asking him, he don't have a lot of the answers to. And I can't blame him because of the role that he plays on the team that he's on.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm
not
part
that
of
they're
that
more
team,
interesting, but it's just
we each have our roles, so I don't want to misspeak and say something stupid.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ryan.
It's great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
There's my card.